The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is holding its Hope Awards dinner, and one of the people being honored is Macy Dugard, who was kidnapped at age 11 and held captive for 18 years. She has released a statement today cautioning the public to give these three women in Cleveland time and space. And she also said, quote, "The human spirit is resilient and the case reaffirms that people should never give up hope." Colleen Nick, a mother whose daughter has been missing for 18 years, lives by those words.
And what I believe is that someday I will look her in the eye and I will be able to say to her, I always knew that you were coming home.
Colleen Nick's daughter, Morgan, was 6 years old when an unidentified man kidnapped her from an Arkansas Little League field. It was June of 1995. Morgan, now missing for 18 years, would look like this today.
Even when people say to us, shouldn't you give up? Wouldn't you feel better if you gave up? You know, my answer is, this is my daughter. And until someone can prove to me that she's not out there and that she's not coming home, I will fight for her every day.
The story of three young women in Cleveland being rescued after 10 years is giving hope for other missing person cases.
All the parents had hope, you know, for their children. And we certainly here at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children always have that hope as well.
She says often it's a bystander who helps solve a missing person case. In Cleveland, Charles Ramsey heard screaming at a home in his neighborhood. He saw a woman trying to get out and helped her break open the door.
I think Charles Ramsey is a national hero. He is everything that we ask people to do. If you see something that doesn't look right, get involved.
Someone who noticed something strange led to the investigation of Philip Garrido and his wife Nancy, who abducted Macy Dugard when she was 11 and held her captive in their backyard for 18 years. And there have been several other children abducted and found weeks, even years later.
Sean Hornbeck, Ben Owenby, Elizabeth Smart, Macy Dugard, and now the girls from Ohio. What I think this really shows us as a nation is that it's a myth that every child who is abducted is murdered. That does happen, but there are children who are held against their will, who cannot rescue themselves. It's our job to rescue them, and they're longing to be recovered and come home.
In 2003, 67-year-old John T. Jamalski was arrested in New York and charged with kidnapping a 16-year-old girl. As the investigation intensified, shocking details emerged of even more kidnappings. Jamalski had grabbed 5 women at different times, holding them captive in his upstate New York dungeon near Syracuse and forcing them to endure repeated sexual assaults. Before assaulting them, Jamalski starved them as well, allowing them to eat the barest amount just to keep them alive. These conditions in which they lived were dirty and disgusting. The homemade dungeon beneath Jamalski's house was equipped with chains for holding his captives down so he could force them into relations whenever he wanted. His youngest victim was only 14, and a captive's imprisonment could run anywhere from a few months to 3 years. He videotaped what he did, increasing their humiliation. Jamalski was apparently one of those quiet guys who fled into a world of fantasy as he grew up. He was college educated, married, and had 3 kids. And as he aged, his need for control increased, as evident in his extreme penny pinching and unwarranted berating of other people. Investing in land, he became a millionaire, but then shut out the rest of the world by building a tall fence around his home. In 1988, Jamalski was cruising around when he spotted a young girl walking alone. He picked her up and took her to his mother's home with the full intention of having sex. Then he decided to keep her, so he chained her into an abandoned well and said he would kill her brother if she ever tried to escape. Because he wasn't asking for ransom, unbelievably, he did not consider what he had done to be illegal, much less kidnapping. He kept this frightened girl chained up as a sex slave for 2 years, forcing her to keep a written record of every sexual encounter. Like the pathetic character in The Collector, Jamalski tried to create the illusion that they were in a relationship. Eventually, he built an underground bunker. While he ensured there would be no escape, he failed to include anything for the victim's comfort except a pipe for fresh air. When he finally decided to let her go, he took her to Nevada and then sent her home by plane to Syracuse. While she was reunited with her family, she told them nothing of what had happened to her. Jamalski continued with 4 more young women, but 3 of them, once free, did tell their families or the police. Still, it was difficult to find them because they didn't know where they had been taken. All they could report was their abductor had been an older white male with a birthmark on his forehead. The fifth girl, only 16, proved to be Jamelski's undoing. He picked her up in 2002 and subjected her to the same treatment as the others, but the girl had a plan to escape by befriending him. And as a result, she gained more privileges, including going with him on outings and using a real bathroom. But when she was in public, she did manage to phone her sister to let her know she had been kidnapped. Soon the police picked them up and arrested Jamelski. When detectives entered the musky dungeon to look around, they found the smell repugnant. But certain items indicated to them that they had finally apprehended the man who had kidnapped at least 2 other girls. Jamelski insisted he had done these girls a favor by keeping them captive. It had been for their benefit. However, the statements his victims made in court about how scarred they still were from their ordeal contradicted him. He received a sentence of 18 years to life. Today, the Insider exclusive investigative Justice in America TV series goes behind the headlines in Missing Kids, America's #1 priority, to examine how Charles Bonner, founding member of the law offices of Bonner and Bonner, got justice for John Jamelski's victims' crimes against humanity. Charles Bonner has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Oakland, in California, in New York, and across the country. He's also the nationally acclaimed best-selling author of The Bracelet, a book that has been described as the story that will end child sex slavery in the world. Charles has litigated thousands of cases, mainly dealing with child protection and safety issues. He has seen many innocent and hardworking people become victims of predators like John Jamelski and Jeffrey Dahmer. He understands that these crimes are some of the most serious, enduring, and divisive human rights violations in the United States. The problem is not just in Syracuse, but nationwide. And because of that, he is driven to fight for people who have been harmed by the willful or negligent actions of others. He learned a long time ago that we all need to keep a constant vigilance in finding missing children, identifying child victims of sexual exploitation, and prevent these crimes from happening. And he knows that when you get into a tight place and everything goes against you, till it seems as though you cannot hang on for 1 minute longer, you can never give up then, for that is just the place and the time that the tide will turn. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Syracuse, New York. It's my great pleasure to introduce Charles Bonner to the show. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Thank you very much, Steve. Great to be here.
Tell our audience a little bit about the type of law that your law firm practices.
Yeah, I'm a civil rights lawyer, and we represent victims of civil rights violations, such as employment discrimination, pregnancy discrimination, gender discrimination. We represent men who feel that they've been discriminated against because they are men by, say, an all-female management team. We represent doctors who feel that they've been retaliated against because they speak out on behalf of patient safety and patient care, substandard patient care, and the administration retaliates against them. So anything that has to do with the constitutional rights, particularly anything that has to do with the first 10 amendments and the 14th Amendment, are the kind of cases that we take.
You're discussing an extraordinary case.
Yes.
A case against John Jamelski.
Yes.
And what he did to young women. You represented one of the young women.
Yes.
And to protect her identity, we'll call her Macy.
Yes.
Tell our audience a little bit about the facts of the case and some of the challenges you had in the pursuit of justice for her.
Yeah. Macy was 16 years old at the time. She was sitting on a porch around about 8 or 9 o'clock at night when a man came into her community in Syracuse, New York, the hood, beckoned to her and her friends to come down to his car. They thought it was a young black man. And he said, hey, want to go to a party, girls? Stupidly, what 16-year-old girls say, yes. He said, get in. He leaned forward. Macy got in the car. Instead of waiting for her friend to get in the car, he sped off. Took her to his house in a very affluent neighborhood of Syracuse and chained her in a dungeon for the next 7 months. Threatened her that he would kill her family. He had a list of all of her family members. And at the time, she was 16, but she did have a 1-year-old son. And he knew all the names of her relatives. But most importantly, and this is what was most interesting to me, is what he told her he wouldn't do to her. And that is, he wouldn't allow her to be sold to a sex ring operating out of Syracuse that was selling young girls to people in Japan. He said, if you just cooperate with me and have sex with me, document the kind of sex you have with me every day, I will not allow you to be sold. But I work for powerful people, and they sell kids. And he would bring canvas bags full of money and have her count it out. But he said, I won't let you be sold. I'll protect you. And then I'll let you go. Eventually, he didn't let her go, and he continued to lie to her, and she turned on him. She figured out a way that she had to ingratiate herself with him, get him to trust her by asking him to take her to places such as take her out, take her to the mall, take her to karaoke. And first she would say, can you buy me some cigarettes, even though she didn't smoke? And he would put a chain, he had a chain on her. He would take her out to the backyard on the chain, and she would have a cigarette. And she then say, well, can you take me out of this dungeon? Because he had built a dungeon under the backyard of his home. I want to sleep upstairs with you, she would say. And eventually he allowed her to. But he'd say, we have to return you back in the morning because these powerful bosses I work for, they can't see you up here. But eventually, after getting a little concession, karaoke, to the park, to the skating ring, she began to believe that this guy would do what she wanted, so long as she just continued to show him the sexual favors and continue to ingratiate herself with him.
And eventually she got a hold of the phone.
Eventually, they were going to go to Canada. He told her he was going to sell some bottles in Canada. In addition to collecting girls, he also collected exotic bottles. He had all kinds of shaped bottles from all over the country and had them neatly cataloged down in the same dungeon in one room and his girl captives in another room. So he was at this recycling center in Syracuse, and he was selling bottles. And on this occasion, she had seen mascara and lipstick in various in the drawer down in the dungeon, and she was wondering, did he kill girls? And now he's telling her he's going to take her to Canada. She was terrified. At the recycling center, she told him, she said, I think my family may have moved town. I need to call my minister to see if they're still in town. Could you call my minister? And he said to the recycling person, may I use your phone book? He looked up the minister's, the church name, and called the number. Mm-hmm. She got the phone, it rang, and she said, I think we need to call him on his cell phone because he's not answering. He said, well, what's the cell phone number? She gave him the cell phone. That was her sister's cell phone number. Sister picks up, where the hell are you? Yeah. She said, I'm with the rapist. He's held me. They said, well, hey, you haven't been here. We've been looking for you. I've been looking for you. The sister said, you memorized my cell phone number. Actually, Macy called her home number. She said, you memorized my cell phone number and call me back. And Macy got off the phone, and they went to another recycling company in the same vicinity. Macy wanted to call back, but couldn't. And then they get on the road, going to Canada. She thinks she's going to die. So she said, John, you rushed me off the phone back there at the recycling center, and I didn't get a chance to finish talking to my minister. Can you pull over and let me make one more call? And he says, oh, okay, but we have to go. We have to get back. He pulled over to Fayette Dodge car dealership, went in, asked the salesperson if they could use the phone. The person said yes. He then stood right next to Macy and watched the number. Macy dialed the new memorized phone number of her sister. Yeah. Angie answered. "Where are you?" She said. She looked on the desk and she didn't know where she was, and she said, "Fayetteville, Dodge." Yeah. Angie then gave the phone to the female police officer. Female police officer said, "Stay there, we're on our way." Macy then continued to talk, pretending that she was still conversing with John. And John said, "Get off the phone, we gotta go." Then John noticed through the display window the cops whirling red and blue
sirens,
lights, sirens. And he said, "Who did you call? Come on, we gotta go." And tried to rush out of the car dealership. Said, "Get in the car." She stalled, and the cops recognized what was happening and made the arrest.
Now, Jamelski was eventually convicted. He's in prison right now.
He is in prison now.
He was sentenced 18 to 36 years or something.
18 to 30 years for the 5 victims. Yeah. Because what was unique about this case also was that of all the other girls who've been victimized, and at the time I was not even aware that this was a major world problem, Macy is the only one who engineered her own escape. Yeah. The other girls were let go. She brought to light that Jamelski had been kidnapping girls for 20 years, and none of them had escaped. He had kidnapped the first girl. Her in this shallow well that was so shallow she couldn't stand up. She was a 13-year-old Native American girl. He held her there for a year. Then he built this dungeon, 2 big 12 by 12 rooms.
Right. We're showing pictures of this.
Yes, and then held her for the next 2 years. Macy brought to light that he had kidnapped 4 of the girls, in addition to getting him arrested. So he's in jail doing 18 to life for each of the 4 girls, is to run concurrently. However, he will never get out of jail.
Sure, because I think he's in his mid-70s or something.
He should be now about 77.
Yeah. You came into the case. There were actually 6 victims, is that correct?
There were 5.
5
Yes.
identifiable victims.
Yes.
You represent
Macy
today for the first time on national TV.
Very first time. This is an exclusive.
And so you had a civil lawsuit against him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What were the challenges in proving this case, and what was the outcome?
Well, the challenges, first of all, was to make sure that we got every penny that he had.
And he had substantial wealth.
He had substantial wealth. He was a real estate investor, and he had property from Syracuse all the way to California. Substantial holdings in the LA area and Glendale. And he had monies invested in various real estate partnerships.
Yes.
So the first challenge was identifying all of his assets and making sure he was not hiding any assets. And our goal, that is the lawyers, myself and the other 4 attorneys, one of whom is Dom Camberera, was to make sure that we got every penny for these 5 victims. And we did. We identified all of his assets.
Was that part of his plea deal? Because you mentioned to me that he has four consecutive running sentences.
Well, 5.
Concurrent.
5. Because there was a total of 5 victims. So it's 18 to 30 for each victim.
Yeah, but they run concurrent.
They run concurrent.
As if they were one sentence.
That is correct.
Was that part of his deal, that he revealed this information?
That was part of the deal.
Yeah.
And that was the major challenge. And the only monies we left him with was a trust that he had set up for his 2 granddaughters who were like 5 and 6 at the time.
Yeah.
But every other penny we got with the idea that if he were to reveal every penny he had, then we would agree to get the girls to allow these sentences to run concurrently as opposed to consecutively.
Right. Now, today we are very fortunate to have Macy with us today.
Yes.
And we're going to bring her on right now.
Very good.
It is my great privilege to introduce Macy to the show. Welcome to the show, Macy.
Thank you.
Boy, when I read your story, I was just truly amazed. You're a really courageous young lady. Tell our audience a little bit about what it was like initially when John Jamelski kidnapped you and you realized that you were really in a big problem.
Well, it took me for a surprise, and it was heartfelt.
When he brought you to his house initially, what happened? He brought you to the dungeon? Mm-hmm. He did, and he chained you up.
He
You must have
changed
been
me.
fighting and, trying to resist it, right?
Yeah. Yep. Couldn't get away.
And what happened after that?
Well, he took me there,
Yeah.
and we got there, and he was telling me that I was stuck there. And so after a while, I went along with it, and I came up with a plan to myself.
Now, he knew every member of your family, the names, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. How did that, Charles, how did that happen?
He had a way of going out and researching people.
So you were targeted.
There was Yes.
no question about
Well, he may have researched her after
Yeah.
the kidnapping. We don't know whether he did it before or after, but he did each of his victims.
Yeah.
He got all the information on their family members and used that to threaten them in order to keep them.
Right. What kind of threats did he say to you?
Well, he told me that if I ran away from there, that him and who he was working with or for
Yeah.
would go out and they would kill my family members.
Right. Did you, when you were initially in the dungeon, did you try screaming or yelling, or when you were in the car, when you were initially picked up?
I thought about it, but I thought that no one would hear it.
Yeah. You were the only person in the dungeon at that time, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. But you saw evidence that other girls had been there.
Yeah.
What evidence did you see?
I seen writing on the walls.
And what's the writing say? Get me out of here?
No. One writing said, one writing had like, what are those, the circle thing, and it's got like the line with the
Peace,
Yeah, the-
symbol.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
the peace symbol. And I had seen other writings, I couldn't really read them out because they had been painted over.
Now, you are the only one of his captives that actually escaped. And you had to have a plan because you didn't want to stay there, right?
Yeah.
You didn't know what was going to happen to you.
No.
Were you afraid that he might kill you?
That too, and I was also afraid that he was going to sell me.
He told you he was saving you by not having you sold to somebody else, correct?
Correct.
What were his exact words?
Well, he told me that the people who he was working for, that they were selling girls overseas and getting billions of dollars for them, and they were selling them overseas, putting them on water.
Putting them on water.
Yeah, they send them to a house.
Yeah.
That's probably in the middle of the water.
Oh, okay.
And he said that I will never make my way back across the water to get to, come back to Syracuse.
Yeah. Obviously, you ingratiated yourself with him because you knew that if you were friendly with him, you might get an opportunity to escape
Yeah.
or contact someone. What were your first inclinations that you could do that with him, that he could be manipulated? Because fortunately, you were able to do that.
I asked him to buy me some cigarettes.
And you didn't even smoke.
Nope.
You were testing it. Okay.
And I asked him to buy me some cigarettes, and so he brought the cigarettes. And then I came up with another thing, and I asked him to buy me some
You can say.
some marijuana.
Yeah.
And he brought the marijuana.
Yeah. Did he ever question why you wanted it? He just went out and did it? Did he feel that you asked him that you guys were getting close? Yeah. Did you ever tell him nice things, that he was a nice guy or something like that to make him feel better?
Not often, but a
Did
few
he?
times, yeah.
Did he react positively to that, like smile or think that hey, I've really got myself a girlfriend here, haven't
Yeah.
I? Chained down in the bottom of the house. Eventually, he took you out, correct?
Yes.
And where would he take you?
He took me to the mall a couple times.
Now, when you were walking with him in the mall, you were walking freely?
Yeah.
Did you feel like running anywhere or yelling or screaming or anything?
I did. And I thought back to the paper that he showed me.
The paper?
Yes.
What's the paper?
The paper that had my family members'
Oh,
names
so
on
you
it.
were in fear for their lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell him about the dog as well.
The dog, Well, the day I got there, he let the dog sniff my clothes out and chew them up, and
What dog? What kind of dog was it?
I have no idea.
You mean in the dungeon?
No, it wasn't. The dog was upstairs in the house.
Yeah.
Up because if I chose to run away, that the dog would find me.
Really? Wow. Now, you were 16 years old at that time, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You were in school? You were in school at that time, yeah? So eventually you were able to call your sister, correct? And what did your sister say to you?
My sister said, "Oh my God, Frenchie, where the hell are you?"
Yeah. You had been a captive for what, 7 months?
I think when I spoke to, yes, it was
7
7
months.
months when I spoke to her, yeah.
What was your feeling the day that the police came and found you with Jamelski at that store? Was it the store?
It was a big relief.
Yeah. What
My heart dropped, and I broke down crying.
Oh, really?
And they took me up to the hospital and got me checked out and stuff.
Yeah. And reunited with your family?
Yes.
Okay. You eventually had to go to court, right? Testify against him?
I did.
Yeah. What was the experience seeing him once again? Were you angry? Very angry?
I didn't see him.
Okay.
When I went, I didn't see him.
Good. Because how long was the criminal trial after?
Well, it all lasted, the whole process lasted a few months.
Yeah.
But, the actual hearing was a morning,
Yeah.
and we kept the victims away.
Yeah. We've seen recently there were 3 young ladies that were held captive in Cleveland. You probably saw that on the news
Yeah.
for 10 years. We've seen other cases, Elizabeth Smart, J.C. Dugard.
Yes.
What do you have to say to young girls out there what they shouldn't do so they don't get in these kinds of circumstances? And if they do, what do you recommend that they do?
Well, I would tell all the young girls to be careful who you talk to.
Yeah.
You know, strangers, as any parent would obviously tell their child. And, you know, just be careful. Stay in school. You know, stay focused and
What about
grow up
getting
and
into cars?
be young ladies.
What about getting
And
into
get
cars?
in No, getting
cars
into
people you don't know.
Yeah, getting into cars with people that you don't know is a no-no.
If
Now, you remember here, this person had his face painted black. He was a white guy, obviously, but she thought you can tell him what about that experience.
That was, okay, he had his face painted black.
Jamelski.
Yeah. And he really did. He looked at like a young
Black guy.
black guy.
Yeah.
And so when we got out to DeWitt, he hands me a $50 bill, and I noticed that I could see white right here.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I said, well, you know, you're not even the color that you had yourself proposed to be.
Yeah.
And so I told him to take me home, and, you know, so he kept telling me I was stuck, and, you know, so I went along with that.
Yeah. One final question. If John Jamelski was here right now, you're on national TV, what would you say to him?
I would tell him he is a low-life son of a gun. Yeah.
And would you say son of a gun? Would you be a little bit nicer than that, or would it be worse than that?
Well, you know, it would be worse than that, I believe, but, you know, so many words.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on our show and giving us your first nationally broadcast exclusive.
Thanks for
It's
having
been a pleasure meeting you, and I and every one of my crew wish you much success in your life.
Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Ishmael and Angela Wilson to the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You got the phone call first, didn't you, from your sister?
Yes.
What was going through your mind when did she sound frantic? What was going through your mind?
No, surprisingly, she she was whispering.
Yeah.
That was, and I hadn't heard from her in over 6 or 7 months. So
What were her exact words?
She was like, hi sister, and kind of speaking to me like normal, and I'm like, Hey,
Where have you been?
where you been?
What'd she say?
We've been looking all over for you. This happened, this happened, this happened. Where you
Yeah.
been? I just started going crazy. And then she started, talking softly in a whisper, and she said, I can't really. Oh, I'm sorry, I was whispering.
Yeah.
But she said, that she couldn't really talk that long and that much, but she wanted me to know that she had been kidnapped and that she had been with a rapist all that time that we were looking for her.
Mm-hmm. Now you found out about it. You were in the Army at the time, correct?
Correct. I was actually doing some business down in Augusta, Georgia.
Right. And what were your immediate thoughts? You haven't located your sister yet, but you know she's alive.
Yes.
Right. What were your immediate thoughts?
My thoughts were, what happened that she wasn't able to call us or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was just kind of surprised after Angie called me and told me exactly what happened. My immediate thoughts were, we have to get somebody to help us.
Yeah. Now, between the first phone call, because I understand that she called you on your home phone first, right?
Yes.
You told her to memorize your cell phone.
Yes.
How long was between each call, roughly?
I would say about a half an hour.
Okay. And how long after that did the cops find her?
I would say about after she called my cell phone.
Yeah.
Probably 5 minutes.
Wow. That was really quick.
Quick.
Yeah.
So when she's rescued,
Yes.
when you start finding out about this pervert, Jamelski, what's going through your minds?
Just sadness. Just horror, nightmares, and I'm the older sister, so I was putting myself in, her, and I'm a sister, a female as well, and I'm putting myself in her position, and just feeling just terrible for her, for the things that she went through.
Yeah. Now that we all know what Jamelski did, he kidnapped 5 girls
Yes.
over a period of time, and the horrible things that he did to them. If he was here today, Ishmael, what would you say to him?
I would tell him that you have to have humanity, and you have to be a person of goodwill. Why would you want to hurt anybody?
Mm-hmm.
It's not worth it. And if he was here now, he'd probably be handcuffed. So I would say, see, now you're handcuffed.
Yeah.
So just stay away from doing things like that, hurting people, hurting young girls and women.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not worth it, and it doesn't make any sense.
What about yourself, Angie?
I wouldn't be as nice and as mild mannered as my
Come on, you're on national TV. Say it like it is. What would you say? Come on.
I would just say I hope he burned in hell. That's just what I really feel, because he didn't just take, although he only had her physically for, 6 to 7 months, he still has her mentally. And for that, I hope he burns, in hell. And he also took her from her son.
It's been 10 years now
Yes.
since this happened. Have you noticed that your sister has improved somewhat in coping with what happened to her?
Yes, this is the first time that she's speaking out on this matter, and I'm really proud of her for being so brave. And it's taken 10 years for her to get to this point, so I'm really proud of her for that.
How do you like the way your lawyer, Charles, handled this whole case on your behalf?
Well, Ishmael advocated strongly for Charles, and I had some reservations initially just because he was out of California and we're out of New York, and I really just wanted to make sure that someone was going to be hands-on and accessible, because that's what the situation called for, and he assured us that he would be accessible. He gave us several phone numbers, several email addresses, and if you can't get me here, then get me here. And then he flew out from California to show actions speak louder than words, you know, to show that he was there for us. And 10 years later, we even call him uncle now, not just our family attorney. And we've even got a chance to fly out to California a couple of times and visit. So we do consider him as a part of our family now.
Well, I want to thank both of you for coming forward on our show. You give other people inspiration when they go through difficult times. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Charles, you eventually went on to write a best-selling book called The Bracelet.
Yes,
Based on this story.
that is correct.
Correct. And one of the reasons that you wrote this book is because you wanted everyone to be aware that child abduction, rings, and sexual slavery is a major problem
Absolutely.
all over the world, but we can do something about it here in America.
Absolutely.
What do you recommend folks to be on guard to make sure that other predators like John Jamelski don't continue to do these kinds of evil things?
First is to understand the problem, to understand that this exists, and secondly, to understand that we can fix it.
Yeah.
10 years ago, no one would have thought that we would have had a black president. 10 years ago, no one would have thought that gay marriages would be accepted by 80% of Americans. You can now go into a store and buy, say, pot like you buy cigarettes. But through education, we've had a cultural change.
Yes.
Likewise with this problem of child sex slavery, which is now the second largest industry, second only to guns in the world, is a $100 billion per year industry. They're targeting girls primarily between 14 and 16, and they're selling them like popcorns. Now, we have to look in the mirror, we as a society, and particularly we as men, and say, why is this happening? When did it start happening? And how do we fix it? First of all, people think that this has been going on since the beginning of time. It has not. It has only been going on within the last 10,000 years, with about the start of agriculture. Now, if you look at the span of human history, about 3 million years, if that can be measured in a picture, say, from New York to San Francisco, we're talking about from the period of time that this kidnapping and enslaving children has been happening. It's about the last 10,000 years. It's like going from here to the mall just a few blocks away. You don't even get close to the West Coast. It's an issue of power. It's an issue of money. So we have to now educate the children to resist, to be aware of who could be a predator. We have to educate communities to be aware, to protect children, to understand that these people out there, bad people out there. And thirdly, we got to make the laws such that these people are put away forever.
Well,
And we get not only at the national level, but we need to be focusing on the UN and making an international law to protect kids around the globe.
yeah. Well, thanks to you, thanks to your best-selling book, The Bracelet, these things are now happening.
Yes, well, thank you.
We're aware of them.
Yes.
America's aware of them, and they are America's #1 priority, protecting children.
Yes.
And I want to thank you very much for being on our show.
I want to thank you very much for having me on your show, because it's this kind of an educational project that is going to liberate children. You are an abolitionist. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.